An intriguing Wednesday night in the first leg of the Canadian Championship semifinals, to say the least. In Hamilton, Forge FC, now 22 undefeated, come away with a hard-fought 2-2 draw against the Vancouver Whitecaps. And in Langley, British Columbia, Vancouver FC, last place in the Canadian Premier League, sprang the upset, defeating a team that's trying to contend and compete on three fronts in Atletico Ottawa. 3-1 final was the shock scoreline of the night. Let's start off with what happened in Hamilton. Oliver Platt, who's feeling better about that 2-2 draw? Will it be Forge or will it be the Vancouver Whitecaps?
I think it'll be Vancouver. I just think going away from home, whoever you are in these ties, coming away with a draw, being able to take it back to your home stadium with an opportunity to win will always feel a little bit better, I think, for the road team. In the first leg, I think we also talked about some of the factors that went into this game with the Whitecaps, with players unavailable, players still being integrated into the squad. You would expect a stronger Whitecaps team, I think, in a month's time at BC Place. But I don't think, it's all is lost for Forge. Certainly a win would have put them obviously in a much more advantageous position going into that second leg. But I think you can look back on some of the previous ties in this competition that CPL teams have played against MLS clubs. And, Forge have been able to go away from home, as we've seen in Montreal, and get results, maybe play in a slightly different way and take their opportunities. We know that some of the things that have cost CPL teams in the past in those away legs, the away goals rule being the main one, is no longer in effect. Cavalry went to Vancouver and won, lost on away goals. Forge went to Toronto, obviously lost on away goals. So I still think they're very much in with a chance. But I do think that one felt like, especially after the early goal and the errors the Whitecaps made, get through it intact and take it back to BC Place. And they've been able to do that.
Yeah, Whitecaps will feel like going back to BC Place. They're in a position where they can advance and try to push for their fourth consecutive Voyageurs Cup. I think both teams are probably pretty happy with the result, but I'll say that Forge FC are a little bit happier. One, their undefeated streak remains intact. That matters at this point. When you get to 22, this is history-breaking, record-breaking stuff. So I think that absolutely plays a part. I think also they weren't overawed or really outplayed by the Vancouver Whitecaps. I think they look at the way that game played out, and I feel like they believe that they're right in it come the second leg. Like, I don't think there was a significant difference just in terms of like the quality in between the two sides and what they brought forward. Yes, the Whitecaps have difference makers like Tristan Blackman on the field and Sebastian Berhalter. Jaden Nelson were lively, but on the balance of it, this Forge team just went toe-to-toe with the team that made it to the final, the CONCACAF Champions Cup game. And a Vancouver Whitecaps team, I know they're missing still some of their big players, but still are well-rested, and we're actually in a decent enough position heading to this game, despite all the distractions off the field around them. This is just the way that Forge play, and I think that they got a good feel about what the Vancouver Whitecaps are all about. And just like they went to CF Montreal the last 2 years in the second leg, they know they have reference points now how to go back and turn whatever performance they put in the first leg, refine some things, make sure that they tactically prepare in the proper way, and they'll be a really difficult team to play against for the Whitecaps moving forward, especially considering every game is going to be a big game now for the Whitecaps based on the signing of Thomas Muller. Things are being ramped up there. So it's not as if, it's a week off here or a letdown performance there would be acceptable for the Whitecaps. They have a lot of big games. There's going to be a lot of attention around this team. I think that Forge can just consistently go about their business with eyes for that September 16th date as being the one which will really, I think in their opinion, will define their season, Ollie.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think Forge, again, like I said, they certainly won't come out of that feeling like they're out of the tie or in real trouble. And particularly with this Forge team, we'll get onto the unbeaten record. Like, they're just so tactically savvy and well drilled every single game that you would feel going away from home, as we saw in Montreal, that they can put together the kind of game plan that can give the Whitecaps problems. They will, I think, be playing, though, a Whitecaps team, you would think, with a bit more firepower and a bit more ability to certainly control that game on their home turf.
I think there's a realistic world where Forge could have very well gone on to win that game. Brian White leaving the game before 50 minutes were up, whether it was precautionary or whether he's actually hurt, that's something that we will monitor. But more specifically, Forge had a chance to take the lead, but a penalty wasn't given. Let's take a look, as it was Brian Wright who got in behind Tristan Blackman, used his arm, then came across the body of the Forge striker, bringing him down inside the area, but there was no call given by the referee, Yusri Rudolph. Is this a clear pen for you? Because from where I was sitting on Wednesday night, it's a penalty all day, every day. And I'm really surprised it wasn't given.
Yeah, twice on Sundays. My problem with this is that I think the referee doesn't have a great view of it. When you look back at the first angle, I think shows that the ball kind of it's a turnover for Forge in the Vancouver half. The ball kind of breaks into the box. Brian Wright breaks into the box. And the ref isn't really that close to it. He's kind of peering through bodies, trying to get a look. I don't think he gets a decent look, and he's a bit late to kind of put his head down and sprint and get closer to that. And so I don't think he has a great view of it. But yeah, for me, it's a penalty. I think Tristan Blackman goes down with the sliding tackle, gets Brian Wright, doesn't get the ball. Wright goes down. That's a penalty. So that's, another maybe instance where things could have turned out a bit better for Forge, and the Whitecaps got away with one a little bit, and maybe that again plays into them, for me, being the slightly happier team coming out of this first leg.
I mean, these are the slim margins. We've seen it with Cavalry in previous years in this tournament. Just the slightest thing can go against a CPL team. It's very difficult to make up that ground, but the wages, the squad, the way that squads are built between MLS and CPL. So yeah, that one decidedly went against Forge. What does go in their favor, however, is the no away goals rule this time around. Yeah. It's a big change to the Canadian Championship. And what saw Forge be dumped out at this stage in last year's tournament to Toronto FC, it saw Cavalry last year be dumped out by the Vancouver Whitecaps the very same way. That is not the case this time around. Forge now unbeaten in 22. What does that number mean to you, or big picture to anything to do with Forge, this team, and any competition it's playing in at this point, Ollie?
It's an amazing record, and to have played 3 MLS matches in that run as well as the what I would say is a much stronger Canadian Premier League nowadays compared to when they set the previous record back in 2019. That was 14 matches, if I remember correctly. But I think just the level of the league, and particularly the top teams in the league, again, in addition to the teams you're playing in the Canadian Championship, is so much better now than it was 6 years ago. So to go 22 is remarkable. I think particularly in this part of the world with the travel involved, just the ability to have a bad day at some point is that little bit easier, I think. But I think it speaks to the way they built this team this year. Maybe not having, on the face of it, real standout star signings in the offseason in the way that some other teams did in the Canadian Premier League, but bringing in a lot of experience and a lot of know-how. And I think that's brought the best out of maybe their biggest X factor, which is their head coach, Bobby Simoniotis, because he has a group of players who just understand exactly what he wants from them each and every week. And I think tactically, they're so strong, they're so adaptable to different opponents, different games. Players like Rama and Babuli and Wright and Nimick, who have been in the league before, or in some cases have been at Forge before, it's just clicked for them very, very quickly in terms of what their manager is asking them to do. They have so many different ways to play. And I think in that aspect, you can maybe point to other Forge teams that have had different strengths. But in that aspect, I don't think there's ever been a better Forge team than this. And it's just made them an incredibly difficult nut to crack each week.
These undefeated runs in sport, they're special. Bayer Leverkusen from a couple years back, never losing Leverkusen. It was incredible to watch in German football. These runs in Major League Baseball, they just captivate an audience. And I just hope that Forge get the attention that they so deserve for doing something in a league with great parity, difficult travel, and they're doing it a step up as well against MLS competition. So it's been an incredible streak thus far.
This, by the way, big hurdle, obviously, last night in terms of keeping the streak going. I think at the weekend away at York with this game coming was quite a big hurdle to overcome as well. They've got another one with Atletico Ottawa on the weekends. If they get through that, you start looking at the rest of the schedule and thinking what might be possible here.
Yeah. Look, convention will suggest the Whitecaps will be significant favorites heading into that second leg. Okay. Muller and the team. Cabrera made his debut last night. We'll see how quickly he amalgamates and whether the young player can make a difference right away. I just look at this Whitecaps team. A couple things matter about the way that things will look in a month from now. Form and fitness. How fit are the players? They've dealt with a number of injury issues. They need some very important players back. Ali Ahmed, Ryan Gold, Veselinovic, Atakubi are not coming back. Obviously, Andreas Kubas will likely be back for the second leg, but these injuries and issues have been a real problem for the Whitecaps. As the big games continue to add up, that will remain a storyline over the course of the next month. Also, what does the rest of their transfer window look like? Axel Schuster obviously engaging in conversations about bringing in other players. They have to be defenders, Ollie. Like Utvik Johnson down that left-hand side, it was a weakness all night long for the Vancouver Whitecaps, wasn't it? So that's what you're looking at from their side of the equation. But for Forge, I really thought they really missed Malik Oluwabi-Bellewu in that game. A different profile of a center back who's been able to lock down and shut down MLS players before in this very competition, and someone who's a different profile of a center back, maybe a better man-to-man marker. That goal, the second goal that was scored by Brian White, jumped off the page, just maybe a little bit more athleticism, a little bit more legs to cover more ground. That M ball, that product that was sent in by Jaden Nelson might not have even got there. So I think that both teams can look at significant absences for them that may play a role heading into the next leg.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it, that second goal, like Brian White, is really good from Brian White. Like he manipulates the centre backs, comes short, creates that space that he then scores the goal in. That's the kind of situation where you think, oh, well, Oluwabi-Bellewu maybe would have been able to deal with it a little bit better. Even if he falls for the initial feint, he's got the pace and athleticism to potentially get back. I do think the Whitecaps, need to be cognizant of how things have gone for them since the Champions Cup final. I don't want to sound overly pessimistic because I think this team is going to get players back and is going to get stronger. But the record since then, and again, there are other factors. They've been on the road a lot. It's been a really tough stretch. The record since then isn't what it was prior to that Champions Cup final, right? It's been more inconsistent, more up and down. So I do think that, getting in a bit more defensive depth, being able to potentially, particularly, I think at the left back position, getting another starter there with Sam Atakubi down is going to be really important. So I think they've probably got the resources in terms of the roster flexibility to get that done. We'll see what happens between now and the end of the window. But you just want to see, especially with Thomas Muller in and putting so much into this season and having come so far this season, that they give themselves absolutely every opportunity to give it a memorable ending by not leaving any stone unturned here.
Let's be clear. The Whitecaps are out of rhythm right now. They 100% are. The record is one thing, and I'll share that number. 4-1-5 since they lost on June 1st in that CONCACAF Champions Cup final in MLS play. And then in the 3 Canadian Championship games, 2 draws, one against Valor, one against Forge, and a win at the death in Valor in the second leg. Yeah. That's it. So their form has been patchy, and they need to get things back on track ASAP for both league and cup play. Let's deal with the 3-1 victory by the Eagles. They were flying Vancouver FC and Langley, British Columbia last night. Honestly, Tierno Bod was the man of the match, but runner-up was the DJ, was crushing it. So shout out to him. Look, this was a big upset. A significant upset in the first leg. Yes, Vancouver looked a little bit of a different team under Martin Nash in these very early days, but Atletico Ottawa had only lost once on the season coming into this game, and although maintained possession of the ball, just lacked that cutting edge. And of course, on top of it all, their manager, Diego Mejia, who hasn't put a foot in wrong all season long from a managerial perspective, made the decision to rest the heart and soul of his team, the 2 central midfielders in Koke and Aparicio. Did the manager get it wrong, Oliver Platt?
I think they've got to learn some lessons pretty quickly about knockout football. I would love to be wrong about this because I would love for a team in the CPL playoffs or Canadian Championship or whatever to be able to go through the latter stages of a competition just blasting teams and playing really attacking football like Atletico Ottawa do at their best. But if you watch these games year after year, that doesn't tend to be the way they go. They tend to be games that you have to be very intelligent, very mature, that you have to manage carefully. And I think we've seen signs, and maybe the warning sign was the second leg against York, where they let a 10-man team get back into it in a game that turned into a crazy game. That Atletico Ottawa haven't quite got there yet in terms of their ability to do that. So I look a little bit less at the midfielders, and I do think Castro has been dealing with something. I'm not sure about Aparicio, so that might have factored in. But I look more at the approach. And I think if you're Atletico Ottawa in that game and you get back to 1-1, you get the equalizer with Sam Salter in around the hour mark, you're done. Shut the game down, get it back to Ottawa. Yeah. Like 1-1 is fine in that moment. Even 2-1 down when Noah Batney makes that mistake, that's not a disaster. Like I think there needs to be a calculation as to how much you push for the equalizer at that point that again was tilted too far in the way of needing that to get that back to 2-2 as opposed to taking 2-1 potentially back to TD Place. Instead, you're 3-1 down, and now they need multiple goals just to get a penalty shootout, and they are in a real hole here. As much as this team can score goals and create a lot of chances on their day.
I agree with you. I was just trying to decipher watching the game whether it was more style of play or personnel, because Koke and Aparicio play every game together, and Zapatero with his experience, Sissoko's obviously a really good player, but it just Diego Mejia doesn't like to rotate. He just plays a consistent team all the time, and Ottawa were just too wide open at times for a cup game away from home. Like cross country, it seemed a little bit naive to me, but whether it was the style of play or the personnel, it just wasn't good enough on the night. And now all of a sudden you have Vancouver, who are last place in the Canadian Premier League and look like they could very well finish in that position, going on to spring this kind of upset against a team that's taken the Canadian Premier League by storm on the season. That has to go down as one of the shock results in Voyageurs Cup history. Would you accept that as the case, or is there a recency bias here?
I think it would. Yeah, I think it's up there. Like you would automatically lean, obviously, to CPL against MLS teams, or particularly early on in the CPL's existence. But like Vancouver hadn't won a game in this competition until last night, right? Like they got through on 2 penalty shootouts. They've been out in the preliminary round the previous 2 seasons. It just shows like there is some talent in this team, and I think a lot of people have been saying it for a while. Like when you look at Mesquida and Bar, and now Mbong's come in and has started really well, Vasco Fry, they do have the ability to hurt teams. It's been defensively that they've been a disaster for a long time, really. And they've just done some basic things well, I think, under Martin Nash early on in his tenure here to solidify that and allow the attacking players to decide games. Like that back four of Dadaluke, Campagna, O'Connor, Enyu, it's not bad on paper. It's defensively solid. It's been the way they've been playing at times, I think, where they've been incredibly aggressive. They're always stepping out of the back line to try and challenge. That has given them problems. So just maybe adopting a bit more of a safety-first approach at the back has given them that platform. They've got a very good goalkeeper, obviously, as well in Callum Irving, and allowed those attacking players to decide the game. And they were just a bit more savvy than Atletico Ottawa last night, which is not what I thought I would be saying about Vancouver versus Atletico Ottawa, given the way the season's gone so far.
It won't get the headlines of some of the other upsets. The miracle in Montreal, once upon a time, obviously the dramatic nature of that, but the way the game played out, it was kind of skewed for a Toronto FC win that night over Montreal. FC Edmonton, Ottawa Fury back in the day would have a decent performance, but no real shock result in the end. The Cavalry won over the Whitecaps, the Pacific won over the Whitecaps. Then in recent years, Forge getting past CF Montreal, all considered considerable upsets. But this one has a different feel to me. Maybe we're just so close to it, covering the Canadian Premier League week in, week out, where Vancouver FC, in some people's mind, like the season was done. They were a punchline rather than a serious contender. Yet maybe we need to kind of reshape the way we think about this very young team, by the way, not as a team that is deservedly a bottom dweller, but perhaps a team that's been underachieving. over the course of the regular season, and perhaps the managerial change, some new blood coming in, some players getting fit can really put this team in a position where the cup run can kind of mask some of the problems in league play. There's no relegation here, so there's no jeopardy, but kind of like, Spurs in the Europa League last season, or we've seen it in cup competitions before where this really becomes the predominant story. And then they rinse, wash, repeat, and get on with it the next season and try to get back on track.
Well, they've clearly been planning for this, I think, for a long time. But that's where the shocking part comes into your question is like previous upsets, I think, whether it's been, Forge or Cavalry or Pacific knocking out an MLS team, or even TSS Rovers knocking out Valor. It's like a top team from a perceived inferior level beating a vulnerable team from a higher level, right? Vancouver are bottom of the CPL. They're in danger of having the worst CPL season in the history of the league. Yeah. So that's where the real kind of feel that this was, totally unexpected and such a big upset, I think, comes from. And certainly if they get the job done, seeing them in the final would be, I don't think we'd have seen anything like that in this competition before.
Just want to mention, Tierno Ba played so well last night. I know it was a cup competition, but I think that helped his case for the under-21 Canadian player in the Canadian Premier League. Because the impression is, hey, the body of work is being great, but what about that performance? I mean, even if it's in a different competition, I still think that it helps his claim to be right in the mix for that honor come the end of the season. Yep. So what questions loom large ahead of the second leg, Ollie, for you from both sides of the equation? Vancouver 3-1, advantageous position. Atletico Ottawa, again, no away goals rule. So, a 2-0 win or a 2-goal victory would then send things to penalty. So Ottawa still very much alive in this tie, but have some serious work to do.
Yeah. How much possession does Atletico Ottawa have in this game is a question that looms large for me. It could be a record breaker. Cloutier and Abatne last night had like 250 passes combined. Like that was an issue for Ottawa. It was just centre backs having way too much of the ball, attacking players not receiving it nearly enough. So I think it's going to be a similar kind of game, to be honest with you, where you see Atletico Ottawa dominate possession, try and break this team down. I thought, to be honest, they had some decent moments, when the game was scoreless and before it kind of got out of hand. So I don't think they'll be completely discouraged. But you're facing a Vancouver team that not only is showing an increased ability to defend, but probably the biggest fear for Atletico is that Vancouver can go the other way and get another one. And then you're obviously in real problems. So Vancouver, they're going to really like the position they're in, clearly.
My storylines, Ottawa is going to be A-okay. Like, their attacking play is still very good. Bring those central midfield players back in. As long as there's no significant injuries to this team before September 18th, I think they'll be all right. There'll be a big crowd. They'll be a big favorite. Yeah, there's work to do. But then it goes to the pressure on Vancouver FC. It was an attack-minded starting 11 by Martin Nash. I wasn't sure how it would play out, but it worked. I think the manager absolutely got it right. That being said, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Vancouver FC's back four. But perhaps this unit with NU on the left, Campagna, O'Connor, and Dadaluke, those are all very competent players. And if those players play to their ability and don't go down the rabbit hole where Vancouver's gone down too many times this season with self-inflicted wounds, it's like amateurish mistakes which continue to bury this team. If they can avoid those pitfalls, then I think that they're going to be okay, Ollie, because there's enough about the rest of the team, I think, to keep Atletico Ottawa honest to a certain degree.
Yeah, and 8 goals in 4 games under Martin Nash so far. So this group has been showing some attacking threat. And as much as obviously you're right, the emphasis will be on the defense. The easiest way they can help their case in that second leg is to score a goal. And I wouldn't rule it out at this point.
Well, as things go in the Canadian Championship, a long wait between games. We got a month between the second leg of these semifinal fixtures. Hey, at least it's not 2 months this time around.